Too many of us wait way too long to have some of the hard conversations with the people that we love related to financial planning for a caregiving journey. And I had a lot of takeaways from today's episode. One of the most important ones was that I haven't really done a good job of having these conversations at almost 54 with my own children. And so that's something we will be rectifying as I move forward so that my children will understand and be better prepared if they needed to take care of me and my husband in the future. If today's episode has resonated with you, I would love to invite you to my next free Ask the Dementor session, where you will be able to come on and ask me individual questions in a group format related to your particular struggles with dementia and dementia caregiving. The link for this brand new segment is in the show notes, and I invite you today to sign up for our next one, which is May 23rd at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So May 23rd at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's called Ask the Dementor, where you can learn a little bit more about your own unique dementia caregiving journey, and I will help you with the first or the next steps that you need to take. But back to episode 118 and the interview with Will Hoffman related to financial planning for caregiving. Have you recently found out someone you love has dementia? Struggling to wrap your head around how to be a Christian caregiver? Searching for answers by joining countless Facebook groups but find them toxic? Learning how to cope with dementia feels difficult, but learning a Christian caregiving worldview can be easy. Hey, brother and sister in Christ, I'm Lizette, occupational therapist, pastor's wife turned dementia coach, and a daughter of dementia. In this podcast, you will learn the truth that the way to make dementia care easy is your faith. Knowing that a loving God has decreed this hard providence in your life makes all the difference. Here you will gain skills. You will be challenged by what God says in His Word about caregiving, and you will learn exactly what dementia is and is not. Find clarity and certainty from God's Word so you have perseverance for this journey. Use science-backed solutions and biblical principles to redeem your time. Praying this blesses you as we dive into dementia from a Christian perspective. Let's glorify God despite dementia. Well, welcome back to today's episode of Dementia Caregiving for Families, and I am very excited to have an interview today regarding a topic that we have not talked about at all, but that is extremely important for any caregiver, never mind a dementia caregiver. But I'm even going to go further. It is actually vitally important for anybody who is over 18 years old. So we're going to talk about wealth management, and we're going to talk about financial planning, or looking at how to prepare financially from a Hoffman wealth management company, where we're just going to unpack a little bit today. What kind of questions, what do we need to think about for ourselves as individuals at any age related to preparing for the future? Because the reality is, at some point or another, and we have no idea when it could occur, we may turn into a caregiver overnight, and we might just as well admit it and start to be prepared for it. So, Will, thank you so much for taking your valuable time today to talk to us about what we need to start to think about related to financial management, and considering the fact that so many people are caregivers and what we need to do to prepare for that. So welcome to today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So why don't we start off with tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you maybe got into the wealth management space, and then what you yourself have seen related to caregiving. I know we talked about it a little briefly off the recording, that, it can happen like on a dime.
Yeah. We're all a breath away, right?
Yep,
That's kind
we
of the
literally
message
are.
we give to our clients. And yeah, we had a great conversation a few months ago before recording.
Mhm.
I took a lot of that to our clients and some conversations. So, I mean, I guess before I start, thank you for what you're doing, and for folks trying to learn more about either how to prepare to
Mhm.
receive care, or how to help, give care for family and friends. So it's important work that you're doing, and don't want that to get lost in this conversation. But like you said, my name is Will Hoffman, president and founder of Hoffman Wealth Management. Wealth management firm just a bit east of the city of Pittsburgh. I've been in business for 22 years now. 20 of it as an independent financial advisor. I heard this the other day, and I'm going to start calling this. This is kind of a get-to job for me. It's
Mhm.
never felt like a job or a career, or while there's been struggles, it's a career that I've really enjoyed. It's a business I love to run. We have put together a fantastic team that works with clients of all ages on just general wealth management, whether it's, wealth accumulation, preparing for retirement. My sweet spot has been Gen X, and working with
Mhm.
Gen Xers like myself, just busy families that are trying to accumulate money, accumulate wealth, try to, start to plan for either education for their kids, or in between that stage where they're planning, finish taking care of their kids, finish the college portion, and starting to plan for retirement. And
Or now they're taking care of their
or
folks,
now they're
right?
taking, right, and that's we're in that sandwich generation right now,
Mhm.
where we're some of us are taking care of both parents and kids. So that's what's prompted me to really start listening to your podcast, and start listening to the advice that you share, because there's a lot of folks that feel a bit helpless in this scenario.
Mhm.
So anything we can do from the financial standpoint to help. What we've noticed is the biggest help that we can be sometimes is just helping them organize, helping them,
Mhm.
read the mail sometimes and understand the statements that are coming in, why their folks have what they have, how they can be impacted by a long-term care situation, or a caregiving scenario, and, help kind of point them in the right direction, whether it's, pointing them in the direction of an elder law attorney, or an
Mhm.
estate attorney, or an accountant to help them through their situation, and kind of be that quarterback on helping them navigate this.
Well, I'm so glad you brought up several of those things, because it kind of gave me a couple of ideas of a few questions that
Sure.
I wouldn't have thought to ask. But what I heard you saying is you almost have the ability to do multiple different things. So, planning ahead if you're a younger adult and you're getting ready to have kids and kids in college and things like that. But if you're a Gen Xer like me, your kids are grown and flown. I don't have to worry about college for them anymore, but I'm getting ready to hopefully at some point or another retire if I can feed my face. Um, and planning ahead for that. But the part that I hadn't thought about was, okay, now I'm the caregiver of my parents and I've taken over their financials.
Sure.
And I've got all of this information that I don't know what to do with, related to what's best for them in their particular situation now receiving care.
Right.
So what I heard is that there's a strong opportunity for people to use somebody like you to take in all of this information, this data, and systemize it and simplify it.
Right. And what we've noticed specifically from our generation's parents is, our profession went through a big transition. It really is still going through a big transition, where we have moved away from just selling financial products to being fiduciaries and overall planners.
Mm.
But our parents were in the era where they were buying the financial product that they thought was best
Mm-hmm.
at that moment. And the discussion was rarely around what happens to this if you need care, whether it's the product or the portfolio or the titling of the account. How does that, and so unfortunately what we see is it becomes, and when I say too late, if they're going through a caregiving situation, it's very difficult to get their input because, they're either dealing with dementia or, something worse. So it's difficult to get their input, and we're left guessing with their kids on what this was to be used for and how we effectively use it in this situation. And that's the biggest challenge is, none of us want to kind of realize our own mortality, right? So they just neglect to consider that when planning, because in that moment, this was the best financial product that fit, whether it was the market scenario or, their current income needs. It doesn't fit now. So how do we help that adjust? And that's what we help most their kids and caregivers try to react to.
Oh, wow. So for somebody coming into a caregiving situation, so say you're a daughter or a son of people who were wise enough to try to plan ahead. They didn't make, hindsight's always 2020, right? They made the best decisions with the information they had at the moment that they made those decisions. But now you're a son or a daughter, and your parents have some assets and they have some of these products, and now you're trying to help navigate this new reality with them. What's the first step that somebody needs to take?
The biggest thing is understanding what all exists, whether it's multiple accounts, multiple portfolios or products, whether it's multiple advisors. That's often something that happens is they have, this portfolio or this account with this advisor or this bank or this institution and multiple places, because that does become a challenge when, daughter has to talk to 2 or 3 different advisors. And, we all have different ideas. We all have different strategies. It doesn't make them right or wrong. They're just different. And daughter may get 3 or 4 different answers. So making sure that they have a team of professionals beyond the doctors and nurses and things that they're working with when it comes to an advisor and, an attorney and an accountant, to make sure that all of this is working together is important. But you hit the nail on the head. The best thing to do is to have these conversations in advance, to the point where after our conversation, my brother and sister and I have kind of tried to come up with a game plan. My parents are 73 and healthy, and God willing, they're going to be with us for a long time, but we're all a breath away, and we're all a breath away from needing care and having to have these conversations. So, we want to make sure that, everybody is at least on the same page. So when it's time to break the glass, we're all not breaking 3 different glasses with 3 different plans.
So first step is just list out everything that they have.
Having that inventory is important.
Okay. And now we have the inventory and say we have, everything in all these different places. How do we pull it together so that it's one plan?
Well, the biggest thing is going to be, and I'm sure our attorney friends would agree, because, while we work through these, we're not attorneys, so we can't give legal advice, but making sure that the person who is going to be coordinating all of this has the permission.
Right. The durable power of attorney.
Whether it's powers of attorney or, medical directors or anything, has that permission, because that is what can sometimes be the biggest hurdle. Is we want to help. We know everybody's acting from a place of good intentions, but the law says otherwise. So we have to wait until those powers of attorneys are established. That is the biggest hurdle that we sometimes notice.
Okay. So first step is pull together all the assets, and then a very close first step.
Right. I would even list them as, 1 and 1A.
Reverse them.
Yeah.
Right. is to ensure that you get the legal part of the equation pulled together.
Yes.
What I actually want people to hear very clearly from you in my conversation today is that particular piece, the healthcare power of attorney and the durable power of attorney, sometimes they're one person, sometimes they're different, right? I'm my mom and dad's healthcare power of attorney. My sister is my mom and dad's financial power of attorney.
Mm-hmm.
So we split the duties between the two of us, but we have those pieces of paper in place. The challenge that we have often in dementia and dementia caregiving is these pieces of paper really need to be put into place before an attorney, specifically in dementia caregiving or cognitive loss, can pick up on significant cognitive impairment of the person who is signing the documents. Because if they notice and they feel that they are not competent to make the decision or have the capacity to make the decision, then they may not allow those documents to actually be enacted or signed. So I know sometimes for a lot of families, these conversations get put off significantly until, the shoe drops, because we don't want to have those conversations. You spoke about, none of us want to think about our own mortality. Well, I hate to break it to everybody, but unless the Lord comes, we're all going to die. And so we have to have these conversations early and often. And I also recognize that some families are not going to do that. And it is very hard for the kid who has an awareness that this has to happen.
Sure.
But if mom or dad don't want to do that, there really isn't much that you can do other than being prepared.
Right.
But recognizing that your hands are tied.
Right. And even if mom and dad don't want to have the conversation, encouraging them to
Mm-hmm.
be as organized as possible. Because, I mean, like you said, we're all going to be there at some point,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's while they're here and in a care situation, or if they've deceased. Neither of which is easy at that time. There's a lot going on, whether it's grief or caregiving or something. So at the very least, if the conversation is a tough one, and folks, money's weird. People
Mm-hmm.
get very, very, I don't want to say just very defensive sometimes about money. They get very, and opinionated is the wrong word, because it's our money. So it's not really an opinion.
Right.
But
people don't want other people to know what they make.
Sure. So making sure that at the very least you encourage your parents to be organized, so
Mm-hmm.
that if and when the time comes, it's one less step that's necessary for the folks that are helping.
Mm-hmm. I have a friend in a networking group that is a elder attorney, and
Mm-hmm.
we went out for lunch a few weeks ago, and the way he started doing his business, which was elder care law before, the iteration before the current business.
Yeah.
It was still elder care law. But what he said is what he realized when his dad passed away, and he actually became the executor and experienced all of that while dealing with the grief of losing his dad and all of those kinds of things. It radically changed his entire view of estate law and how to be prepared for it. And so he significantly works with people to become, to establish trusts and those kinds of protective mechanisms, so that you don't have to go through probate and fight. And now you're fighting the legal system on top of everything else. And, just putting all of your assets, or considering putting and people don't necessarily think they have a lot of assets.
Right.
But even life insurance
Mm-hmm.
is an asset. And that
it's funny you say that. It's amazing that we'll encourage folks, hey, you need to think about powers of attorney. You need to think about, examining these, talking to an elder law attorney and professional to make sure that everything, and their first reaction is, well, I'm not a millionaire. Say, you are, you just haven't realized, well, but they are, and they haven't realized it, just where we stand with the current market. The market's at or very near a high point right now, historically speaking. Real estate values are at all-time highs.
Mhm.
It really just takes a healthy 401k and your personal residence at this point to be a millionaire.
Correct.
And to have those issues, and you don't have to have accumulated what you perceive to be, broad-based massive wealth to be in a situation where estate taxes get expensive, care becomes expensive.
Mhm.
And how do we protect and deal with that? It can be very, very pricey from a tax or a fee standpoint.
Right. And investing in the a lot of people will say, but I don't want to spend $5,000 or $3,000
Right.
or $10,000 to do this. But the flip side of it is what you just mentioned. Your house. You live outside of Pittsburgh. I've lived in Pittsburgh. I mean, houses in Pittsburgh in a decent neighborhood are easily $500,000 or $600,000
Sure.
now. Here in Greenville, where I live, Greenville, South Carolina, you can barely find a house under $500,000.
Right.
So it's like you said, if your parents bought their house in 1950 or 70 even.
Right.
1970, they bought their house and they've had it for 54 years. That house is now well worth significant amounts of money in a lot of parts of the world, in the country. So, investing that time, that money, and spending the time ahead of time to plan for it means you could save literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes.
Yeah, and that's, folks say that all the time about the price of doing this process when it comes to attorney's costs or accounting fees or something. But price is absent in the presence of value, and if you're getting the protection that's necessary, that those fees are minimal compared to the ease of what the process can be, or the savings from a tax and cost standpoint when it's too late.
Yeah, for sure. Say that again. The price is absent.
Price is absent in the presence of value.
Oh, I love that.
So it's I always make the Disney analogy. It's no secret that Disney is terribly expensive.
Oh, for sure.
And we've taken our kids a few times, and we never leave feeling like we got ripped off. It's if the value is there, the price is irrelevant. And when it comes to going through this process and making sure that assets are protected, making sure that accounts are titled the right way, making sure that measures are taken while they still can be taken, that attorney's bill is minimal compared to what it can save you.
Or even your
I mean, it just forget taxes in a state, and just in a state of mind whenever you're going through the situation, what the attorney's fees can save you, in headspace when it comes to going through this is worth the price of admission, if you ask me.
So for people listening, when is the right time to start with asset protection?
Right now. Right.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, and that was the biggest thing I took from our conversation a few months ago was right now. At the very least, if you don't know what to do right now and you're sitting there saying, I need to do something, get organized. Have statements organized, have, if you don't get paper statements, which many folks don't anymore, making sure accounts and passwords are listed and kept in a safe place so that your loved ones know what to do in the event that you can't tell them what to do. Every town I know has an attorney or an accountant or a combination of both in it that is going to know infinitely more than you know right now about how to protect these assets and measures that you can take. There's always seminars, webinars, things that are available, free resources to try to take part in prior to being this situation, to at least get you pointed in the appropriate direction. Because, the work that we do with encouraging folks to save, nobody's going to care about what the fluctuations in the market are doing if we're shelling out $10,000 or $20,000 a year or a month for a nursing home,
right?
When we could have protected the assets,
right?
When the average cost of skilled nursing right now is $8,700 a month, and that's a national average.
Yeah.
So when you have that happening, and maybe it's happening to both of your parents at the same time, all that hard work and saving and investing is wiped out in the course of a year. The fee, like I had mentioned, the fee for an attorney to find out how to protect those assets the right way is important. Or if you need to pay but you can't because the power of attorney documents haven't put in place, that's the biggest thing. Is I need to pay for dad, but I can't tell his bank to send the money to the long-term care facility because I'm not a power of attorney yet. We're all on high alert right now for all the cybersecurity concerns we have. The bank, you and your father could have both had a relationship for hundreds of years with this bank, and it's not going to matter. They can't take your instructions without that power of attorney document.
Yeah. When my dad got super sick a couple of years ago, one of the strategies that we implemented, which I'm eternally grateful for, since he had the beginnings of changes in his own thinking processes at that time, was we've invested, it's the best $100 a year, in a password keeper.
Yeah.
Where they have their own password keeper with a master password, but I have the master password as well. So he still does all of their financial stuff, but if something happens, I can get into the password keeper to actually see what's going on.
Yeah. Well, beyond our parents, just in our own households.
Yeah. Well, I've got one too.
Yeah. Parents do it for your kids. If they're, off to college, your spouses, it's such a digital world, and you can call, MasterCard tomorrow or Chase Bank tomorrow and say, hey, I need to get into my husband's account. And they're going to say, without a power of attorney, we can't help you.
Right.
So sharing that information now is, and protecting it is important.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a very good point that I actually haven't thought about. Like, I have a married 27-year-old and an unmarried 25-year-old. Now, the 27-year-old who's married, she and her husband have their documentation. But my 25-year-old, I know I don't know that she has a will. I'm going to have to follow up with her. And we need to make sure that she has a written power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney, and at least have that enacted, because she's independent. She has her own assets. And, these are not conversations that we think to have with our 22-year-old, 25-year-old kids. But this reminds me that, yes, even though she's not 76 and 78 like my folks, whose power of attorney I have, my husband and I have one, but my daughter Estelle, who's 25, also needs one.
Yeah.
And so
some of the most important stuff we've done for our clients, regardless of health, is asking them if they want to list a trusted contact on their accounts, so that, and that goes as far as, making life easy for them to get their documents to their accountant at tax time. If they name their accountant a trusted contact, that's easy for us to share for them, and makes life easier for them with their attorneys, with their kids or their parents, so that if something happens, at the very least, their parents are listed as a trusted contact. It doesn't give them the ability to take distributions or to make trades, but it does allow us to share information that can be helpful in a pinch and in an emergency. So that's something that folks can immediately ask their advisors if it's available. How do I do that? And when can I do that?
I have never heard of that, a trusted contact.
Yeah, it's something that we can include on our account opening documents that we ask them if you would want us to share information with anybody in an emergency, who would it be? And that way we can send statements, we just can't take instructions. So we're just saying, here's a statement, but that's it.
Right. So they cannot make decisions, but they can see
Right.
what's going on.
Correct.
So they can be informed.
Right.
In order to be able to, when they in the future maybe need to help and take over, they're already in a better position and not trying to figure it all out on the fly.
Right. Right.
And
that would
be a really helpful way to think about doing things.
Yes. And at the very least, it's a good start. It's by no means going to solve any tax issues or solve any power of attorney issues, but it's at least a good place to start, because like you had alluded to at the beginning of the conversation, these conversations can be uncomfortable. I mean, I don't know that we've ever been in a comfortable caregiving situation where our client didn't have the right documents, though. So it's a great place to start.
So once we get organized and we get our documents together and we've got the healthcare power of attorney and the financial power of attorney in place, what are some next steps that people could take if they were already, more proactive than a lot of people to actually set themselves up for success through a caregiving journey financially?
This is going to sound counterintuitive because it's our job to ask, but let your advisors know. Now, like I said, it's our job to ask. We should be asking our clients if they have these documents. Can we at least know they're in place? If you have a go-to kid or somebody that you're putting in charge, it'd be great to meet them at some point so that the first time we're meeting them is not in a high stress crisis situation. But that's our job to ask. But if your advisors aren't asking, make sure they know. Make sure they know who it is. Make sure they know where the documents are. Make sure the person you're putting in charge knows. That's probably just as important as making sure your advisors know. And then after that, reviewing this situation is important. Whether it's every year, every 6 months, it's important to review. And one thing folks don't think about is if you've done this before you've retired, and then you plan on retiring to a new state, whether it's to live by the beach or whether it's to, follow your kids to a different state to be near grandchildren, make sure those plans are valid in the state where you're going to live. Every state has its own set of laws when it comes to power of attorney. Every state has its own set of laws when it comes to estate and estate taxes and probate. So making sure your current documents still fit where you're living is important, especially that medical directive. And if east of Pittsburgh, we get folks that snowbird a lot. So they'll go to Florida for 6 months and stay in our area for a few months. Making sure that powers of attorney, especially with medical, are valid in both states is very, very important so that the caregiving doesn't get disrupted. But that reviewing that is important. Family situations change, beneficiaries change, all of that thing. Anytime there's a change, making sure your documents and things are still written the way you want them to be is important. Reviewing them with your family so the kids know, hey, if something were to happen, we moved our safe. Don't start busting up the floorboards because we told you it was over here when we've moved the safe. All of that becomes very important.
Yeah, for sure. Like my mom and dad, they have 2 safes in their house, and I have the combination to both of them, not because I'm going to do anything, but because that's where the documents are. And that way, when something does happen, I can step in and help.
Yeah. But the reviewing is important just as much as putting them in place. All of that is vital to success whenever it's time to use those plans.
So to recap real quick, I have 4 steps now in my mind. Legal and financial power and medical power of attorney, get organized. And I totally lost the other 2. Reviewing was number 4. What was the third one?
Reviewing and letting the folks know
Letting people
that they
know.
are in charge, letting your advisors know
Right.
where these documents are. All of those things, that's that those are all very, very important steps. And again, 1 through it's hard to prioritize, but
Right.
all 4 of those steps are important.
They all really have to happen kind of at the same time, but
Right.
people shouldn't delay just because they are stressed because of a caregiving situation, because
Sure.
it's going to get more stressful as it goes on.
Right. And especially if when you're talking about specifically dementia,
Mhm.
If you want to have a say-so before those cognitive abilities start to diminish, it's important to communicate that
Mhm.
beforehand. If you want to have an opinion about where you're receiving care
Mhm.
or the type of situation you want to be in, it's so important.
Sure.
Communication. I mean, we could have avoided wars if we would have communicated better. So, communication solves so much. Over communication. I don't think there's such a term, but
Right.
communicating. My wife may disagree that there's no such thing as over communication, but over communicating is not going to be, or it can be over communicating can be your friend given this
Absolutely.
situation.
For sure. So if Gen Xers, if they happen to be listening, so both you and I are Gen Xers,
Right.
if they happen to be listening, if they wanted to prepare for themselves for the future,
Mm-hmm.
like they're not contending with, they may be helping a parent or somebody with cognitive loss, but they're now, because they've had that in their life and they're more aware, these kinds of things happen, or they've seen the consequences, and they're still at that age where they have some time to pre-plan and so on. If I wanted to protect myself
Mm-hmm.
financially for 20 or 30 years from now, if I were to have dementia, what is the current, and things change, right?
Sure.
Products change. We talked about that a little bit before we came on. What is the current sense or feel about the usefulness or the validity of long-term care insurance? And the reason I ask this question is because decades ago, some of the long-term care insurance policies were very well written
Mm-hmm.
and provided a lot of support and help to people. But I have also heard over the last several years that that those policies are no longer available, obviously, because more people are using
Right.
and needing long-term care. Or is a long-term care insurance policy, like a policy set up for me if something happened, to be able to be paid to go to a facility, are they still worth it for people to invest in?
That's a tricky question, because while the older types of policies may not be available, that market has evolved.
Mm-hmm.
And it's evolved to fit the demands of what the demands that currently exist.
Mm-hmm.
But in that evolution, the prices have also evolved. So a lot of folks get sticker shock
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to insuring. And while I don't know what, everybody's situation is so different, if a product is going to solve that or not, it really depends on how it fits into their financial plan.
Mm-hmm. The overall financial.
It may be necessary. It may be too expensive. It may be something that doesn't become valuable given somebody's assets. It really, they really are tricky conversations and tricky products to navigate. But what I will say is, for Gen X, all four of those steps that we mentioned are important, even now, considering, I know we don't want to think about this, but Adam Sandler was just on the cover of AARP. So we are getting there.
That is good.
We are
That's a
getting there.
word.
While I'm still celebrating the fact that just this week we made our last daycare payment, because my youngest is finally out of daycare. I'm a 78 baby, so I'm on the tail end of Gen X and celebrating milestones that I don't have to pay for daycare anymore. So that's we're still very early in the process of planning. All four of those steps that we mentioned are important, and part of getting organized, in my opinion, is getting a good, solid financial plan, reviewing that plan all the time for changes, communicating that plan as often as possible with our clients, so that when changes happen, when it's time to examine different types of products or services, that we're leading rather than following our clients at that point. But there's no secret that the landscape for long-term care products has changed. The products that my grandparents bought to help them are not the products that my parents are going to use, and we know they're not going to be the products that we use or that our kids use.
No, for sure. So what I really, the essence of what I'm taking from our conversation today is that all of us actually really need a team. Most people tend to think in silos.
Yes.
My attorney over here, my accountant over here, my financial guy over here, my doctor over here, all of these different silos. But related to planning ahead to navigate a caregiving journey, we really need a core team of an accountant, a financial planner, and an attorney who will work together.
Sure. Yeah, that's our best relationships with our clients when we're working with all of those professionals together, making sure, because the good ones all have their clients' best interests in mind. The good attorneys, the good accountants, so it's easy to work with them. We want the accountant's advice because we know that the better advice they're giving us, the better job we can do for our clients.
Right.
We need the attorney's input, because if we don't have it and don't open the account the right way, everything that he's written
goes out the window.
Could be, potentially lost. So we want their opinion. We need their opinion. They need our input to understand, how things can be used when it's time to either spend them or protect them, given what they're putting in place. So, of course, to obtain all three of those disciplines, I'd still be in school instead of having 22 years of experience, but and a lot of heavier student loan debt or tuition payments to make. But it's important for folks to work together and understand that. And there's a lot of resources that are emerging as well to get a head start on those things, like podcasts like this that you can listen to and understand a little bit more on how to navigate those things.
Now, you also have a podcast, correct?
I do. The Monetary Mixtape. Yeah, it's we're getting ready to start our second season, where we just talk about Gen X wealth management topics. We mix in a little bit of Gen X pop culture into the conversation. We have some fun with it. We had a pretty cool inflation conversation when we talked about Gen X toys and things that from our childhood, music, movies, pop culture, sports all fit into the conversation. So, we have a little bit of fun with it, but we do want to have the serious conversations, because, with 22 years of experience, I've watched the first generation to be funding their retirement retire. And, pensions are gone, and it's up to our generation where, we're funding our own lifestyles after retirement. And I don't want my generation and my peers to have the confusion or make the mistakes that we've watched baby boomers have to go through, because we get our financial habits from our parents. And
Oh,
baby
for
boomers'
sure.
parents did not have to fund their retirements. Social Security and pensions were about it.
Mhm.
That's all that were needed. And baby boomers, justifiably, had some confusion when it came time to retire because they didn't know how the 401k was going to work without a pension. They didn't understand how, okay, I've accumulated. Now it's time to spend. What do I do? How does the portfolio change? So, we're trying to lead our generation to not make the mistakes and endure the confusion that baby boomers had to.
I love that. I really, really do. Now, your company has the capacity to work with people all over the United States.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not state
We
specific.
right. And we all age demographics. While I, am sensitive to demographic, or my demographic and Gen X, start to finish, from somebody that left college yesterday and is ready to start their professional lives to somebody who is, working through the inheritance process and the estate process, we work with.
That is awesome. So if people wanted to connect with you, Will, what is going to be the best way for them to do that?
Sure. HoffmanWealth.com is our website. There
Okay.
is a scheduling button right there. If you have questions and wanted to schedule a call, you can click there. I'm very active on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Just listed under Will Hoffman, AIF, and Hoffman Wealth Management on LinkedIn. Those are the two easiest. You can always email me at will@hoffmanwealth.com if you do have questions or something immediate, and just one point in the right direction. Like I said, we're trying to lead here, so we
Mhm.
want our generation to get through this a lot smoother than other generations have had to. And we know that there's a lot that goes into these conversations. We want to be
Mhm.
partnering with folks like you that can help them when it comes to caring for their kids. That sandwich generation is tough. Watching
Yeah.
my friends, take care of their parents and make sure their kids are getting to Little League on time. And
Mhm.
oh, by the way, first tuition payments due, and navigate that is a challenge. And we still have our lives to live. We're still very ambitious and goal oriented,
Absolutely.
and don't want that to fall by the wayside. So,
Well,
so it,
that's speaking to my heart, because I believe that we need to protect ourselves as
sure,
caregivers.
yeah,
Before, you cannot take care of your kids and your folks and not take care of yourself.
yeah,
You're creating a problem. You're just kicking the can down the
right,
line, and truly, making things worse for everybody
right,
when we don't take the time to actually take care of ourselves.
yeah,
Now, I also know that you put together like a report or something for people to
yes,
point them in the right direction.
yeah. We're gonna have for you to share a document, 11 financial tips to make caregiving easier. So, kind of some of the things we talked about, some things we didn't talk about, just steps that folks can take if they need a place to start on how
Absolutely.
to get organized, on documents that are important, on team members that are important to have, on how to start those conversations with the folks that you need to start them with. Yeah, we'll have that ready for you to share
Yep,
when this goes.
it'll be in the show notes, and then it'll go out in the email as well for people, if they
Okay.
when they're ready to, if they're on my email list, they'll get it via email as well. But I think this is something that we're not talking about enough.
Right. And it can have a greater impact than the return on your investments, than the taxes that you pay on your assets, than the fees that you pay to attorneys and accountants and to advisors. All of this stuff can have a bigger impact than any of those things can. And while we worry about the return on our statements every month, these are conversations that need to be had. And
Mhm.
the more they're being had, the more folks are communicating, the better health and better care we're taking of all of us and
Right.
each other.
And I'm one of my biggest takeaways for everybody is have these conversations early and
Mm-hmm.
often. And even if your family member who you see as the family caregiver, the oncoming train, you
Mm-hmm.
see this thing coming, it's coming, you see some changes in the people that you are helping and love. don't be the ostrich and stick your head in the sand and say, Mom and Dad don't want to talk about it, because what you're in essence doing is yes, you're not right at that moment necessarily, taking the bull by the horn and sitting down and saying, hey, let's hash this out. But when they get to that point when now they cannot make those decisions, now you're frantically scrambling.
Yeah.
And trying to figure it out.
And my thankfulness for you doing what you're doing is, we've sat at the table with families after the caregiving is done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time to disperse assets. And nobody's talking to one another.
Yeah.
Everybody's angry at one another. The family has been, divided, and I'm pretty confident in that nobody wants that.
No.
And by having these discussions early, you avoid that. You keep families together. You keep everybody on the same page. You keep everybody happy. And that's ultimately what we want. When it comes to, the stuff we do every day, while it's important, it's just money.
Yeah.
And all of those other things are so much more important.
Yeah.
And the way to keep that table cohesive is to have this communication, because I've seen the alternative, and it's heartbreaking to watch, especially when you knew their parents, how good of parents they were, how good of people they were, how good everybody at the table is, but there's angst, there's animosity there, and it's always from a lack of communication.
Right.
So if those can be solved first,
yeah,
everything else just gets so much easier.
And so much of that is preventable.
Yeah.
If those discussions had been held earlier on.
Yes. So if anybody's listening to this episode for the first time, listen to the rest of Lizette's episodes, because it solves all of that stuff. This stuff will figure itself out when it comes to markets go up, money goes up, all of that stuff.
Money
the documents,
money goes, but our relationships.
Yes. So understanding everything that goes into this caregiving process is so important from a communication standpoint, and what we are doing is helping at that point. But what Lizette, what you're doing is vital to keeping those families together and keeping everybody happy, and making sure Christmas still goes forward whenever Mom and Dad are gone, and the family dinners and traditions and legacy continue, because that becomes more important than the money a lot of the times.
No, I totally agree. I really agree. I think our relationships, that's one of the big things that, there are two things that I'm really working on changing. Number one is starting with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that necessarily from a financial perspective, but that plays a role in it. Mm-hmm. But what I mean is beginning with the end in mind is, what do I, as a caregiver, want to look like when I'm done with this journey?
Yeah.
Because at some point or another, I'm going to be done with this journey. Right. And I can choose, is my health in the toilet? Are my financial assets in the toilet? Are all my relationships in the toilet? How do I want to look on the other end? And then just, being proactive about putting into place strategies and things so that I don't end up, that person who, did you know about 30% of family caregivers die before the person that they're taking care of?
That I did not know that stat. That's a very troubling stat. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to be one of those 30%. Yeah. I've actually even heard it as high as 62%, but I think it's closer probably to the 30, 40%.
Yeah, that's startling. Yeah. That's
and you're a number.
Yeah. Well, and that gives us more motivation to make sure we're doing a better job, because you like you said, this process will end.
Yeah.
And
at
what's
some
left?
point or another.
Yeah.
Well, thank you what's left. So much for being here. I'm so excited about this. I feel like there's so much more that we could have said, but there's so much more that I just want people to start to think. Don't be the ostrich. Don't stick your head in the sand.
I don't have any plans on going anywhere soon, so
Hey, we'll be back.
We'll be back. If there's questions that your listeners have, put them in a list and let's get back together and
Yeah, for sure.
maybe put them in a list and we'll have you
Absolutely.
on a monetary mixtape here soon.
Oh, for sure. Well, I want to be on that.
Yeah.
I was on Michelle's podcast. I don't know when it actually comes out recently. Michelle is a mutual friend of ours.
Yes.
And just for people who are listening, and it was about Gen X, and I had a blast.
Yes, she's doing incredible work. She really is. Just on, on goal setting and on headspace and everything. She's I was also on her episode, one of her episodes, and you could just talk for hours with her
For sure.
and about whether it's money, whether it's about, ambition, whether it's about, your values, which is an important part of something that goes into our plans is, the values. I don't mean dollar signs. I mean,
right. Your personal
values, your personal values when it comes to your money. It just is. Yeah. Michelle's another one that is doing great work for our generation and for folks to listen to. So when the folks are hitting the road for their summer vacations, we can fill their podcast queues with all kinds of things, right?
For sure.
Make sure and then they'll hear the monetary mixtape and be ready to go listen to some Gen X music for a little bit too.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to being on yours, and I thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
I really, really am looking forward to those 11 tips, financial tips for caregivers. To have that, because I'm going to read through it myself.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Do you feel alone and isolated and need a little bit more help and support in this journey? Sign up for our next Ask the Dementor monthly meetup, where we will come together. Less than 10 people are allowed to sign up at a time, so we can have fellowship where we can answer questions, where you can get some Christian guidance and just an awareness that you are not alone on this journey. I really want you to be able to connect with me. I want to be able to answer your specific questions. So if you're struggling, if you're tired, if you're overwhelmed, if you're stressed, if you just need a little bit of help, sign up for the next Ask the Dementor monthly meetup. The link is in the show notes below. Thanks for joining me today, Success Seeker. I pour my heart and soul into this program to serve you. You can serve me by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. And join our free Facebook group, Dementia Caregiving for Families. It's a positive and proactive space to navigate dementia caregiving together. Get practical tools and find support, but without the verbal vomit. Be a part of our community where we seek to find peace of mind and ease, despite a dementia diagnosis. So join today and see you next time as our flight takes off.